Their biggest mistake was thinking you wouldn't walk away. They believed your silence was weakness, that your patience was fear, that your loyalty was dependence. They mistook your calm for surrender, your kindness for compliance, and your endurance for inability. But they never realized that a soul trained in discipline does not beg to be seen, it chooses when to leave unseen. They thought they owned your presence, yet they never understood that your presence was a gift you could withdraw at any moment. When a person learns to master their emotions, they stop clinging to what was never theirs to begin with. Walking away is not an act of pride, it is an act of clarity. It is the understanding that peace is too valuable to be sacrificed for the comfort of others. You did not leave because you stopped caring. You left because you cared too much for yourself to continue being diminished by those who could not see your worth. The world often teaches us to chase validation, but wisdom teaches us to guard our dignity. You realized that your silence was not emptiness, it was power restrained. They thought you would stay because you always did, because you forgave, because you tried, because you believed that consistency would earn recognition. But the truth is, some people only understand loss when it's staring them in the face. They only appreciate your absence because they never valued your presence. They kept testing your limits, never realizing that limits exist even for the most patient heart. They kept taking without gratitude, never realizing that every act of unappreciated kindness becomes a lesson in restraint. Eventually, you grew tired, not in body, but in spirit. You realized that endurance without purpose is not strength, it is self-neglect. The decision to walk away is not made in a single moment. It builds silently, like a tide beneath the surface, gathering strength from every moment of disrespect, every empty promise, every subtle betrayal. You begin to see things differently. The mask falls away, and you stop arguing with illusion. You see the truth, not as something dramatic, but as something simple. You no longer wish to convince. You no longer wish to fix. You simply wish to be free. And when that moment comes, when you finally rise and turn your back, the world around you grows quiet. Those who underestimated you finally realize that your absence carries a weight greater than your presence ever did. True strength is not in holding on, it is in knowing when to release. The Stoic heart does not run from emotion. It understands it, measures it, and then acts in alignment with reason. There is no hatred in walking away, only clarity. You do not curse them, nor wish them harm. You simply withdraw your energy from where it is wasted. You understand that not all battles deserve your fire, and not every bond deserves your endurance. You accept that sometimes people must lose you to learn what they refuse to see. They believed your loyalty was eternal, that no matter how they treated you, you would always return. They didn't see that loyalty without reciprocity turns into foolishness. You learned that devotion must have balance, that love without respect becomes suffering. You saw how they expected your forgiveness, as though it were owed, not earned. But you are no longer the person who pleads to be understood. You are the person who walks away when understanding is no longer possible. There is a stillness that comes after you decide to leave. It is not emptiness. It is peace reclaiming its place. You start to notice how light everything feels when you stop carrying the weight of others' expectations. You realize that your silence is not loneliness. It is space for healing. Those who once spoke over you now speak to your absence. Those who ignored your voice now listen to their own regret. And though you do not seek revenge, the quiet consequence of your departure teaches more than any confrontation ever could. The human heart is not a prison. It was not made to remain trapped in situations that suffocate its spirit. When you walk away, you are not abandoning others. You are returning to yourself. You are honoring your worth without demanding that anyone else recognize it. You are choosing the discipline of solitude over the chaos of disrespect. You are understanding that love, when pure, does not require you to destroy yourself for its sake. The mistake they made was not simply underestimating you. It was underestimating your growth. They thought you were the same person who tolerated their neglect. But pain changes people in quiet ways. It sharpens perception, strengthens resolve, and teaches the sacred art of detachment. What once kept you bound now becomes your teacher. You learn that letting go is not an ending. It is a return to balance. You begin to see that everything you once thought you needed was only temporary, and that the only true stability comes from within. You stop explaining yourself. You stop seeking closure from those incapable of giving it. You stop performing for people who cannot appreciate the authenticity of your heart. Instead, you find strength in your own solitude. You begin to rebuild, not out of anger, but out of wisdom. You focus on what is within your control, your mindset, your actions, your peace. The Stoic mind does not dwell on what could have been. It accepts what is and acts accordingly. They may call you cold for walking away. They may say you've changed. But that's the irony. They wanted your strength until it was directed toward leaving them. They wanted your patience until it became indifference. They wanted your love until it became self-love. What they see as distance is really discipline. What they call pride is actually preservation. You no longer allow yourself to be drained by those who refuse to grow. You choose to stand alone, not because you wish to be isolated, but because you value your energy too deeply to waste it where it's not honored. It takes courage to stay calm when everything in you wants to react. It takes discipline to choose silence when your ego wants to scream. But this is the path of true strength. Not the strength to control others, but the strength to master yourself. When you walk away, you do not need to prove your point. Your absence speaks louder than any words. Your peace becomes your message. Your stillness, your statement. You no longer chase closure, you create it. They believed they had time. They believed you would always be there when they decided to treat you right. But time is not infinite, and neither is patience. Eventually, the balance must be restored. The same energy they dismissed returns as silence. The same effort they ignored disappears without warning. They realize too late that your consistency was not weakness. It was a choice. And that choice is no longer available to them. When you finally walk away, you see how illusion fades. The same people who made you doubt your worth suddenly speak of it. The same ones who belittled your presence now long for it. But the Stoic spirit does not return to what broke its peace. It forgives without revisiting. It remembers without bitterness. You do not seek revenge because the truth itself becomes the consequence. The truth that they could have had something lasting, but they chose to gamble with your loyalty. In walking away, you reclaim your power, not from them, but from your own attachments. You realize that freedom is not in escaping others, but in mastering your own mind. You no longer depend on external validation to feel complete. You understand that peace is an internal decision, not a gift from circumstance. You stop needing others to do right by you, because you have chosen to do right by yourself. They thought you wouldn't walk away, because they never imagined you could live without them. But you were never dependent. You were just devoted. You were never weak. You were simply patient. And when that patience reached its end, you did not collapse, you transcended. You learned that walking away does not make you heartless. It makes you free. It allows you to live without resentment, without guilt, without the noise of constant disappointment. Life teaches through contrast. You needed to see their indifference to understand your worth. You needed to experience their absence of care to learn the importance of your own boundaries. You needed to endure mistreatment to learn the art of detachment. Everything that hurt you refined you. Every betrayal polished your perception. Every disappointment strengthened your discipline. Now, you no longer chase, because what is meant for you will never require you to abandon yourself to receive it. Their biggest mistake was thinking your loyalty was endless. But even loyalty has a limit when it is taken for granted. You learn to protect your peace the way a warrior protects his soul, with vigilance, with discipline, with silence. You no longer offer yourself to those who drain you. You no longer justify your worth to those who fail to see it. You walk away with quiet confidence, knowing that peace will always be better than proximity to chaos. The power of walking away lies not in what you lose, but in what you regain. Your focus, your clarity, your balance. You come to see that peace is not found in fixing others, it is found in mastering yourself. And in that mastery, you find everything you were searching for in others: stability, acceptance, and calm. You learn that you were never asking for too much. You were simply asking the wrong people. They thought you would not walk away, but you did, and in doing so, you reminded yourself that your strength was never in holding on, it was in letting go. You showed them that your silence carries the weight of every lesson you learned, every boundary you rebuilt, and every part of yourself you reclaimed. Walking away was not the end of something. It was the beginning of everything that was meant for you. They thought you wouldn't walk away because they thought they knew you. They saw your kindness as permanence, your forgiveness as a guarantee. They believed they had studied your soul enough to predict your every move. But they were blind to the quiet strength growing in you, the strength that comes when a person has endured enough disappointment to finally stop hoping for change from those who refuse to evolve. They thought they could wound you and still be welcomed. They thought you would stay because you always had. What they didn't realize was that every time you stayed after being hurt, you were not submitting. You were observing. You were learning the truth. You were learning that not every connection deserves to be saved. That not every apology restores trust. That sometimes distance is the only medicine that works. You were learning how to detach without hatred, how to move without noise, how to let go with dignity. They believed you were soft, but your silence was steel. You had become so calm that they mistook your peace for passivity. They never realized that the quietest ones are often the ones preparing to disappear. And when you finally left, you didn't slam the door. You closed it gently forever. Walking away is an act of self-respect, not rebellion. It is the point at which your soul refuses to be treated as an afterthought. You stop arguing, not because you cannot win, but because you understand the cost of your peace. You stop explaining, not because you lack words, but because your energy is too sacred to waste on deaf ears. You stop showing up, not because you've grown cold, but because you've realized that your warmth was being taken for granted. It is a strange feeling. The moment you stop needing what once felt essential. The moment you realize that peace feels better than attention. That solitude feels safer than confusion. That walking alone feels freer than standing beside someone who drains your soul. You do not need to announce your departure to those who never listened when you spoke. You simply walk, and let your silence echo what words never could. They thought you wouldn't walk away because they never believed you would choose yourself. But you did. You chose peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, dignity over approval. You chose to stand where your presence is valued, not tolerated. And that choice, though it broke you first, eventually rebuilt you stronger. They mistook your departure as indifference, but it was self-preservation. You were not leaving to prove them wrong. You were leaving to become whole again. The Stoic heart does not beg to be understood. It simply accepts what is. It understands that some people cannot meet you where you are because they are still lost within themselves. It does not resent them, it simply releases them. You understand that clinging to people who cannot see you is like holding onto smoke. It only suffocates you. You begin to see that walking away is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is knowing that you can love someone deeply and still recognize when that love has turned into suffering. They thought you wouldn't walk away because you always showed compassion. They didn't realize compassion has boundaries. They didn't know that empathy without limits becomes self-destruction. You learned that kindness without wisdom leads to pain. So, you stopped explaining your worth and started embodying it. You stopped waiting to be chosen and started choosing yourself. That was the shift they never saw coming. The transformation from needing validation to becoming complete within your own silence. Your departure was not sudden. It was the result of every ignored feeling, every dismissed concern, every time you said, "It's fine," when it wasn't. It was built from years of staying quiet to keep peace, only to realize that peace built on suppression is not peace. It's delay. So you walked away not in anger, but in understanding. You finally saw that what they offered was not love, but attachment. Not partnership, but control. You saw how much you had shrunk to fit into spaces that were never made for your growth. And so, you left. They will remember you differently now. They will tell stories about how you changed, how you became distant. But you know the truth. You didn't change, you just stopped participating in your own mistreatment. You stopped offering explanations where none were appreciated. You stopped bleeding for people who never noticed your wounds. You simply decided that your peace was no longer negotiable. And when peace becomes your priority, everything unnecessary begins to fall away naturally. In silence you rebuilt. In solitude you grew. You learned to enjoy your own company again. You began to appreciate the mornings where no one disturbed your calm. You started to value the kind of stillness that doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. And as you grew, the things that once had power over you lost their grip. You no longer craved validation from those who misunderstood you. You no longer sought closure from those who couldn't give it. You found that peace was not something you found in others. It was something you uncovered within yourself, once you stopped chasing it externally. They thought you wouldn't walk away because they believed you were afraid to be alone. But solitude does not scare the wise. It strengthens them. You learned that solitude is not punishment, it is purification. It allows you to see what truly matters, to realign with your own values, to remember who you are without the noise of others. You learned that being alone is not the same as being lonely. Loneliness comes from being surrounded by those who make you feel unseen. Solitude, on the other hand, is the luxury of self-connection. There comes a moment when you realize that the greatest revenge is not revenge at all. It is peace. It is living without bitterness, without resentment, without the need to prove. It is smiling quietly, knowing that what was once heavy no longer burdens you. It is the silent power of moving forward while they remain trapped in their same patterns. The lesson is simple. Those who underestimate your strength will always be surprised when you choose yourself. Their biggest mistake was believing you would always choose them, even at the cost of your own peace. They never considered that your love for yourself would one day outweigh your fear of being misunderstood. But that is what growth looks like. Choosing peace even when it means walking alone. You learned that not everyone is meant to walk your entire path. Some are only meant to teach you when to let go. So you walked away, quietly, without anger, without drama. You did not announce your worth, you lived it. You did not argue for closure, you created it. You did not seek their understanding, you accepted their ignorance. You let time and silence become your final words. And in doing so, you reclaimed your life. They thought you wouldn't walk away, but you did. And in that moment, the balance was restored. You found yourself again, not the version that begged, explained, or endured, but the version that simply is. Whole, calm, unshaken. You learned that peace is not something to be negotiated, it is something to be protected. And from that day on, you never again allowed anyone to mistake your love for weakness or your silence for surrender. Because the truth is, their biggest mistake was not underestimating your patience. It was underestimating your power to leave. They thought you wouldn't walk away because they confused your stillness with fear. They mistook your patience for permission. They believed that, because you endured their indifference, you would continue to do so indefinitely. But endurance is not infinite, and even the calmest soul has limits. You may have stayed long enough to understand their nature, but not long enough to let it destroy you. They believed they had time to take you for granted, to toy with your emotions, to offer just enough to keep you near. Yet they forgot that even the kindest heart eventually grows tired of explaining its worth to those who are blind to it. Walking away was not the end of love, it was the beginning of self-respect. It was the moment you realized that your heart deserves rest too, that your soul deserves silence more than constant conflict. You didn't leave because you stopped caring. You left because you finally cared for yourself. You realized that no amount of loyalty can compensate for someone's inability to value it. You realized that love, when unbalanced, turns from healing to harm, and harm, no matter how familiar, must be left behind. They thought you wouldn't walk away because they believed you were attached. But attachment fades when it becomes one-sided. When every conversation feels like begging, when every effort feels unnoticed, when every boundary is tested, attachment dissolves into clarity. You begin to see things for what they are, not what you hoped they would be. You stop romanticizing potential and start honoring your peace. You no longer see leaving as betrayal, you see it as the highest act of self-preservation. They may call you heartless for leaving, but they will never understand how much of your heart you gave before you did. They will never know the nights you stayed awake, trying to understand what went wrong. They will never feel the heaviness you carried trying to keep something alive that was already fading. But one day, they will feel the silence you left behind. One day, they will realize that your absence has more presence than all the noise they made when you were there. In walking away, you became something they never expected. A mirror. Your silence forced them to confront themselves. Your distance revealed their carelessness. Your peace exposed their chaos. You did not need to shame them. Reality did that for you. You simply stepped back, and life began to speak louder than your words ever could. Because nothing teaches like absence. Nothing humbles like the realization that someone you thought you owned was never yours to control. They thought you wouldn't walk away because they thought you were like them, afraid of losing. But you are not afraid to lose what costs your peace. You understand that loss is not always a punishment. Sometimes it is protection. You no longer fear empty spaces because you know emptiness can be filled with better things. You no longer fear letting go because you trust that what is meant for you cannot be taken away. The mind that has tasted peace no longer chases chaos. You reached a point where arguments began to sound hollow, where apologies without change began to feel insulting, where explanations began to feel like noise. You no longer needed to win them over. You needed to win yourself back. So you let go, not because you were weak, but because you were wise. You understood that real strength is silent. It doesn't announce. It doesn't threaten. It simply walks away. And while they were busy trying to test your limits, you were quietly raising your standards. They thought they were breaking you down, but they were shaping your discipline. Every disappointment became a lesson in patience. Every act of disrespect became a reminder of your boundaries. Every betrayal became an initiation into clarity. And clarity, once gained, cannot be unlearned. They thought you wouldn't walk away because you cared too much. But they failed to see that caring deeply and tolerating disrespect are not the same thing. You learned that love without respect is poison. You learned that empathy without discernment leads to self-destruction. So you stopped giving your energy to those who drained it. You stopped explaining your value to those who refused to see it. You stopped showing up for people who never noticed when you did. You began to understand the beauty of distance. That not everyone deserves access to your heart. That not every situation deserves your reaction. That peace grows when you stop trying to fix people who enjoy being broken. Walking away became your act of discipline, your act of love for yourself, your declaration that you refuse to live beneath your worth. They will replay every moment, trying to understand when you changed. They will wonder when your voice grew quiet, when your gaze turned distant, when your patience turned into calm indifference. They won't realize that your silence began the moment they stopped listening. They won't understand that you were leaving long before you physically left, because leaving doesn't start at the door. It starts in the heart, when hope finally runs dry. You are no longer angry. Anger would mean you still expect something, but you expect nothing now. You have accepted that people act according to their level of awareness. Some remain trapped in cycles of self-centeredness, and no amount of love can awaken them. So you stop trying. You wish them well, but from afar. You release them without bitterness, because resentment binds you to what you're trying to escape. And you refuse to carry their weight any longer. You learn that peace is not given, it is built. You built it from the ruins of your own heartbreak. You built it by choosing silence over argument, distance over drama, purpose over pain. You built it by realizing that nothing external can disturb the person who has mastered their internal world. They can gossip, they can twist, they can regret, but they can no longer reach you. You have become untouchable, not because you are above them, but because you have transcended their chaos. They thought you wouldn't walk away because you always forgave. But forgiveness does not mean reunion. Forgiveness is freedom, not permission. You can forgive someone and still never allow them near you again. You can wish someone peace while protecting your own. You can release the past without inviting it back into your life. That is wisdom. That is balance. And now, when they look for you, they find only silence. No explanations, no messages, no second chances, just silence. The kind that teaches more than words ever could. Your silence becomes the lesson they never wanted, but desperately needed. They will learn that the greatest loss is not being rejected. It is being ignored by the one who used to care. You have become what they never expected, at peace without them. You have found that you don't need closure from those who broke you. You only need closure within yourself. You have discovered that peace is not something you find. It's something you decide. And you decided that day you walked away. Their biggest mistake was thinking you wouldn't. But you did. And in that single step, you reclaimed your life, your power, and your peace.